Hello, my name is Alfie Moore, and welcome to It's a Fair Cop. The show where you, the audience, are sworn to face the same policing dilemmas that I faced in today's real case. I'm here to guide you as an experienced sergeant with the Humberside Police, an area which geographically ceased to exist in 1996. We decided to keep the Humberside Police brand, although we changed our motto from protect, help and reassure to sorry you're in a queue, a cold taker will be with you as soon as possible. And we're thinking of changing it again to at least we're not the Met. To measure the performance of a business, you look at things like revenue growth, profit margin, client retention rate. More difficult to measure the performance of the police, as we never make a profit and often retain our clients. What's been trying to pass is setting performance targets typically around reducing recorded crime and increasing detected crime. Reducing recorded crime is really easy. As recently as 2020, Greater Manchester Police were put into special measures by our inspectorate after failing to record 80,000 crimes. Their Chief Constable, Ian Hopkins, wasn't so much sacked as amicably agreed to bring his retirement forward after Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham put all his possessions in a bin liner and locked him out of his own office. When it comes to increasing crime detections, that's a bit trickier. One tactic I've seen is to steer the crime classification towards the target that you're trying to hit. For example, if I got a knife and stabbed you in the arm, is that an assault, an affray, possession of a bladed article, or a criminal damage to a shirt? Depends which performance target you're trying to hit. Chief Constable Ian Hopkins would probably record an acupuncture. Making a decision to record a crime is the easy bit. The next decision is, do we investigate it? And the decision after that is, do we investigate it thoroughly? The problem is, like many public sector services, the police are massively under-resourced, and the cold hard truth is that we can only ever investigate a minority of offences. And so who should decide which ones? Let's take a quick vote. Option 1, the police should decide, the politicians should decide, or the public should decide. Everybody voting, please. Who thinks the police should decide? I'm going to say that's about 25% of the audience. There is a slight conflict of interest, of course, because we like to get off on time. Who thinks it should be the politicians that decide? That's one person in an audience of about 250 people. I feel obliged to get a mic to this person as the I don't want to put you on the spot, but what's your name?
My name is Sally.
What's your thinking there, Sally?
We elect politicians to make these decisions for us.
Okay.
And if we make the right decision, which of course we often don't, but if we do, they should come up with the answers. They're paying for it.
Who thinks it should be the public that decide? Hands up if you think the public should decide. Well, I am going to say that is maybe 60% of the audience, and I like that answer. That's, of course, what should be happening through your Police and Crime Commissioner or north of the border, the Scottish Police Authority. Today's real case is set during the insatiable drive for police performance targets. But it's also a story about a holiday gone wrong. We asked you, our audience, what's the worst holiday experience that you've ever had? We've got Andy, who tells us the worst holiday experience he's ever had is skiing in Spain. Because there wasn't any snow. Next up, we've got Jilly. And Jilly tells us what is the worst holiday experience you've ever had. And Jilly says that my villa had not been turned down properly. So I returned from the evening swim. I yawned and stretched whilst closing the curtains, and a small lizard fell into my mouth. Well, it's a good job it wasn't a big one. So, last one then. What's the worst holiday experience you've ever had? France, West Coast, 1972. I was 12. A small dog weed in the restaurant on the floor, and the owner used the same cloth to wipe up the pee as he used to wipe the tables. Oh, how we laughed. It's time to swear you all in as cops for the show. Please raise your right hand, repeat after me. You're Nick Sunshine. You're Nick Sunshine. Right, you're all officially police officers for the duration of the show. You may be aware that the Humberside region has an iconic tourism hotspot. Yes, Cleethorpes, aka the Humber Riviera. A lot in common with the French Riviera, a lot of the nightlife is based around Cannes. I won't be flippant, it's been a tough time for holiday destinations. The 2020 lockdown is estimated to have cost the Cleethorpes tourist industry almost 120 quid. Because of the seaside seasonal population swell, extra officers are temporarily drafted in, and this year I was one of the lucky winners. One sunny morning in early April, I turned up for the shift briefing given by my new sergeant, John Drake. A tall man with cold eyes, no interpersonal skills whatsoever. He preferred to communicate through the medium of brightly coloured charts and graphs, determined to get promoted one Venn diagram at a time. A remote clicker in one hand, a laser pen in the other, and my very first police briefing by PowerPoint presentation. I got the gist of it. We were behind on our Home Office targets around violence and dwelling burglary detection rates. After 30 minutes of slides, I found myself thinking, I wonder if the situation could be improved if we actually went outside to catch the bad guys. Fortunately, I was saved by the radio. Tango Bravo 03, we've had a call from Golden Sands Holiday Park. Site manager reporting one of the caravans entered via forcing the door. Believed offenders still on scene. I repeat, offenders still on scene. As I pulled onto the site, I could see site manager Jonathan Todd pointing to a caravan with a damaged door panel. Parked outside was a tatty old Astra estate. I get on the radio and ask if there's a unit to back me up, but there are none close by, probably all on charge. Audience cops were at the scene of a caravan break-in. There are no other units close by. Who's going to wait for backup? And who's going in? Okay, so there are your two options. Where are the waiters? Hello, who are you?
I'm Bill.
You're old Bill.
Well, I am old as well, yeah.
Bill, what's your thinking?
Well, if you're there on your own, when you don't know what you're going into.
You're waiting, Bill, that's fair enough. Who's going in? Where are the adrenaline junkies? Who's going in? Okay, lady on the end here, you're going in.
Well, you're a trained officer. That's your job. Just get in there and sort it out.
Thank you, Liz Truss. I agree with Bill's point. I have no idea what I'm walking into, and so waiting for backup is exactly the right thing to do. But having said that, that's no fun, is it? So I'm going in. Audience cops, are you going in empty-handed or grabbing some personal protective equipment? Yes, the police have PPE too. It's okay. We don't let the government ministers put the contracts out, or we'd end up with a van full of misfiring tasers purchased from a company that's only ever previously made garden gnomes. Hands up, you're reaching for your PPE. Hello, who are you?
I'm Chrissy, and
Chrissy.
I'm certainly very careful about my little tiny body, and I want to protect it for my husband's sake.
Absolutely no reply to that whatsoever, Chrissy. Right, we're all set, and in I go. On entry, I nearly trip over the shoes lined up in a row just inside the door. 2 adult pairs, followed by 2 very small pairs. There was a couple in the 20s, 2 young children, all in sleeping bags. You know your career's going well when you're at work before a 2-year-old's even got up. I give a sharp hello, and both adults wake up with a jolt. Audience cops, what are we going to say?
Is there anybody else there?
Have you confused this with a seance? Sorry, can you clarify? Is there anybody else there?
Has anybody come into your caravan?
Okay, are you assuming that it's their caravan? Is that the assumption you're making at this point? Are most of the people assuming that it's their caravan? Anybody think it might not be their caravan? And okay, shall we talk to this chap here? Hello, sir.
Well, I would sort of, if they're in sleeping bags, and the thing has been forced on people, they've got in, maybe they've got in and are using the caravan unlawfully. So the question would be, is it your caravan?
Is it your caravan? Okay, is it your caravan? Is that a reasonable question? Could that be classed as a police interview, do you think? Potentially. The Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984, PACE, tells us that a single question can amount to an interview if it leads to a suspect incriminating themselves. I knew the rules around interviews, and so I deliberately didn't ask the question. Instead, I made a statement. I'm here because someone's reported a break-in to this caravan. This is the art of getting an answer without actually asking a question, sort of the opposite to an interview on the Today programme where you ask lots of questions and get no answers. Although, for best effect, after your statement you pull an expectant face and leave a painfully long pause. They both answered, we've just come in to sleep. Is this your caravan? No. Did you have permission? No. Oops, I'm asking questions, I know. But I'm thinking that's okay. My view is that you're not actually bona fide suspects until I can establish that you don't have lawful authority to be there. And I'm speaking as someone that arrested a very suspicious man climbing through the window of his own house. You know how your logic can get a bit skewed when you're drunk? Well, he decided that he didn't want to wake his wife by walking through the front door. So he went through a rear window, and no, he wasn't an ex-commando. He was actually a quantity surveyor from Portsmouth Council. It was his wife that rang the police. She thought he was a burglar. When I got there, he was stuck in the window. I had to pull him out, locked him in the cage of the van, at which point he slurred, "I live there." So I got his wife to come out. She's still in a dressing gown to identify him, and I could tell by her use of the long pause that she was briefly considering saying, "I have never seen this man before in my life." So here's where we are. We have a couple in the 20s with 2 kids, aged 2 and 5-year-old. He was from Sheffield, she was from Barnsley, so a mixed marriage. Any idea what offences we're looking at? Any idea? Audience cops, any idea? Breaking and entering, somebody said there's no such thing in the UK as breaking it. That's an Americanism. That's like eggs over easy, do the math, or Gloucestershire. Any other guesses? Criminal damage, okay, criminal damage, okay. I think somebody said housebreaking. That's just in Scotland, housebreaking. Trespass. Trespass is generally considered a non-criminal act, with some exceptions listed under the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act. They're mainly around being a pesky nuisance by getting in the way of rich people killing foxes. In 2012, a new offence was created of squatting to stop poor people sleeping in rich people's second homes. You've got a feel for the rich folks, haven't you, really? I mean, they could do with a tax cut, really. Back to our caravan. We know there's been a criminal damage, and we have 2 suspects, and we have reasonable grounds to arrest them both. But should we? Audience cops, here are your options. We can arrest both of them, arrest one of them, carry out an on-the-spot written interview and then report them for summons, or issue words of advice. Who's going to arrest them both? No one in the room. Words of advice, then. Who's going for words of advice? Okay, that is a surprising number of hands. I would say maybe about 20% of the audience. That's all the people that don't have a caravan. Who's going for the written interview option? Not many. Okay, I would say a handful are going for that. Known in the trade as contemporaneous notes. The wider issue with that is not bottoming it now, is that cases are heard in the local courts where the crime has been committed, where the offence took place. They live in Sheffield, and they would have to keep coming backwards and forwards to Cleethorpes for plea hearings, adjournments potentially, sentencing, so not ever so practical. I mean, it won't be a problem in the future because one day all low-level cases will be on Zoom with a judge sitting there in wig, cape and pyjama bottoms. Who says then arrest one of them? Okay, what's your thinking? Arrest one of them?
Yeah, I'd probably arrest the bloke.
You arrest the bloke? Okay. Your thinking being?
Generally, I'm not saying this is right, but generally the woman would be looking after the kids, and you don't want to... I said generally. I mean, if anybody wants to disagree with that, that's fine. But I would argue that I am correct in that. I'm not saying they should, but you know.
What's your name, sir?
Dominic.
Okay. All right. I mean, this could be potentially the first time an entire Radio 4 live audience has been cancelled for misogyny. There'll be a "I stand with Caravan Girl" hashtag trending on Twitter before the end of the record. Okay, Dominic, okay. But what about locking her up and giving her a break? You know, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, put her in a cell for a few hours and she'll be like, this is what I call a holiday. Now, I do agree with you, Dominic, not for the reasons you gave. I decided to arrest a fella, he's called Tony, but my reasoning was different. It was because she was from Barnsley and I could not understand a word she was saying. I once stopped a driver from Barnsley and asked, do you know what the speed limit is on this road? And he replied, is it 30 or is it 40? Is it 30? Is it 30 or 40? Is it 30 or 40? I did my head in, I just let him go. I couldn't cope. It was actually a very easy decision because Tony stepped forward and said it was me that damaged the door, so I arrested him. Now, he's obviously worried about his family. His wife couldn't drive. I really don't want to ruin their holiday. We've all been there. Take my honeymoon in Menorca. My wife and I had a lovely little ritual where we'd sit on the balcony and have sundowners. Sparkling wine in champagne flutes, looking at the sun setting over the ocean. Very romantic. Then one evening my wife said, look at that pedalo on the horizon. That's a long way out. And I said, that's not a pedalo, it's a boat. And she replied, it's too small for a boat, it's a pedalo. And I helpfully mansplained, it only looks small because it's a long way away. And she said, it's a pedalo. I said, listen, okay, I know I should have backed down at this point, but I knew it was a boat. And we were two quite strong-willed people, and off she went, boat, pedalo, boat, pedalo, boat, pedalo, boat, pedalo. After a couple of minutes, we were both so frustrated and angry that we sat there in absolute silence, clenching our teeth, gripping our champagne glasses, while we watched that boat come closer and closer to the shore until we could both clearly see that it was a pedalo. 17 years later, even today, if we have a minor disagreement, my wife will often gently show me the palm of her hand and say, are you sure you're not having a pedalo moment? Back to our caravan case, and of course we have a duty of care to the family, and one of my colleagues turns up to give them a lift back to the police station. As I drive Tony in, he tells me that he shouldn't have gone into the caravan, but he'd promised the kids a weekend at the seaside and he'd lost his job and he couldn't afford it. And so he turned up and looked for an empty caravan. I felt sorry for Tony, I told him I'd try and get him sorted in and out as quickly as possible. Back at the Nick, it was obvious that Tony had been in custody before. He declined a solicitor, wanted to get straight into interview, where he fully admitted damaging the caravan door. I asked him if he'd taken anything from the caravan. He assures me he hadn't. It's all very straightforward. I make representations to the custody sergeant, who says, let's get him charged. See if the duty CPS prosecutor can get him before the magistrate straight away. Easy peasy. That's when Sergeant Drake comes storming in, drags me in the office. In his hand, he's got a brightly coloured scatterplot graph with umpteen colour stickers, labels on it, waves it in my face and said, do you know what this means? What it meant was we were behind in our Home Office dwelling burglary targets. Drake starts to bang the desk and shouts, they'll have taken something from the caravan! If you were an half-decent copper, you'd be detecting a dwelling burglary! And I said, well, if I was an half-decent copper, I wouldn't be working an early turn shift in Cleethorpes. I know that burglary is a nasty and intrusive crime, but there are 3 distinct levels. The lowest level is shed burglary, which is obviously a hate crime against men. Then there's commercial burglary and the most serious, dwelling burglary. And you may ask, is an old caravan that no one stayed in for 6 months actually a dwelling at all? If you've got targets to hit, it's a dwelling. If you've got targets to hit, a Wendy house is a dwelling. In fairness, at the time, Britain was the most burgled country in the EU. But we're not anymore. Anyway, Drake insists I take a surprise-looking Tony back into interview and start to fire more questions at him. Had he or his family taken anything from the caravan? Ornaments, cutlery, anything? No, I've told you, honestly, definitely not. And he switched the heaters on. No, honestly, you saw we were there in sleeping bags. We even brought our own squash for the kids to drink. When I report back to Drake, he said, squash? Where was the water from? When I told him about the tap, he jumped up excitedly. Oh, the tap! He's stolen the water! It's a burglar! It was highly contentious. Sergeant Drake was pulling out the reference books, arguing down the phone to the CPS, the Caravan Prosecution Service. The conclusion was that Tony was charged with the criminal damage and burglary. And I was very tempted to single-handedly increase our violent crime detection rates by punching Sergeant Drake on the nose. Before the court would accept the file, I needed a complainant statement, and time was running out before they stopped the day's submissions. I dashed back to the caravan site. The manager who rang it in earlier had gone home. The owner of the caravan lived in Leicestershire, so I grabbed a statement from one of the staff which read, on behalf of Golden Sands, I can say that no one has any right or authority to damage or enter any caravans on our site. I raced to the magistrate's court, handed the file to the prosecutor just in time, and Tony was produced at court for an immediate hearing. The magistrate considered the burglary of water charge and literally laughed it out of court. He did plead guilty to the criminal damage to the door and was convicted and fined £50 to be paid £5 per month. I half expected to be shouted at some more by Sergeant Drake for losing the burglary case, but it turns out he didn't give a jot. Police targets were counted at the point of charge. That was classed as a sanctioned detection. After that, if we lost the case, we still kept the number, and so we didn't really care what happened afterwards. Drake would be a step closer to promotion and an extra Home Office chocky biscuit for the divisional commander. In fact, probably a bit more than that, because it turned out that senior police officers were on cash bonuses of thousands of pounds for hitting their Home Office crime detection targets. And in fairness, some turned it down, but many didn't. A few weeks later, I called in the Golden Sands site, had a cuppa with Jonathan Todd, the guy who phoned in the original report. I could see the caravan from his office, and I noticed that the cardboard's still covering the broken door panel, and I said, well, they've not repaired it yet then? And he said, oh no, that's been done months. And I said, oh no, that was done 3 weeks ago by that young family, you rang it in. He said, no, it was done way before that. I never said they damaged it, I just said there were people inside. I could feel the blood drain from my face. The offence of criminal damage Tony had admitted to and was convicted of at court, he never did. And he admitted to it in interview because he was desperate to get back to his wife and young children waiting outside for him in a strange town. I'd helped facilitate a miscarriage of justice. If I'd have done a thorough investigation, then Tony would never have been able to be convicted of something he hadn't done. Who thinks I should fess up to this and take the consequences? Who feels strongly I should do that? Who are you, please?
My name is Irene.
Irene. What's your thinking, Irene?
I just think it's a principle, really, that you're wearing a uniform and you're there in a position of authority, and okay, it might be just a caravan or whatever, but it's a principle, really, and he didn't do what he admitted to.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. It was a tough call, and after a sleepless night, I walked into my supervisor's office and confessed all. When he said, "Forget about it, it's done now," then it just got twice as difficult. I ended up having to go above his head to get the conviction expunged, which didn't make me very popular. Let's just say that the Venn diagram that arrived on my desk from Drake had two interlocking circles, one labelled police officers and the other labelled people who are going to get a massive rollicking, and my name was in the interlocking section. What's it all got to do with target culture? Well, no one noticed my very basic errors that went completely unchecked. No one cared about me or Tony or justice. They were just too busy desperately trying to find some numbers by any means possible to hit their targets. The Home Secretary has recently released plans to bring back police national league tables and targets. And of course, I fully understand the desire to measure police performance, but I do know that if you want to thoroughly investigate a crime, then simply follow the evidence. Don't do what I did and think you know best. I was absolutely convinced that Tony had damaged that caravan door. Just goes to show that even when you're right, when you know that you're 100% right, please bear in mind, you may be having a pedalo moment. Goodbye. It's a Fair Cop was written and performed by me, Alfie Moore. The script editor was Will Ing, the producer Sam Holmes, and it was a BBC Studios production for Radio 4.